Morgan Muchnick. He's a Republican strategist and the founder of the M2 Group, which is a government and public affairs firm here in Washington, D.C. Morgan, really great to see you here. How big of a win is this for the Trump administration, and do you see it having any impact on the president's polling ahead of November?
Yes, thank you for having me tonight. I was, like a lot of Americans, surprised and excited by the news when the message came across and the president and his team did the press conference. I am of the belief that this is quite a big win, both for peace in general, in terms of sort of the broader movement for a more peaceful world, but also politically. It's fascinating that with the president, the moods can shift dramatically. Just a few weeks ago, many of my friends and colleagues on the Republican side were planning for a probable, maybe not definite, but a probable Trump defeat. But I'm telling you, the mood is shifting, and this was a very big win. And if I could just quickly harken back, well, maybe before I say that, let me just say that when I first was asked to do TV after the Trump win a few years back, I vividly recall being asked if I thought President Trump, and this was on a different network, whether I thought President Trump would preemptively nuke North Korea. And I had to swear to the host of that show that the president will not irresponsibly nuke another nation's capital. And of course, that didn't happen, and things are stable. I mean, they're not great with North Korea, but they're stable. But people thought that this president was going to be responsible for the outbreak of World War III. And instead, we see a peace deal in Afghanistan. You know, we see this incredibly interesting and hopeful peace deal between UAE and Israel, the first peace deal, I believe, with any Arab country since Jordan in the early 90s. And
Morgan, what do you make of Biden's claims, though, that he had something to do with this by planting the seeds for this deal? Can he claim any credit here?
Well, I mean, he can claim anything he likes. And someone like Joe Biden, he's not a bad person. But when you've been in office and you've been behind the scenes in the Senate and foreign relations committees and the like, you're going to have a hand in everything, because you've literally been there forever. So has he been in some committee hearings where they discussed or debated this? Probably. But he's in a no-win situation right now, because he can't just come out and say, this is so good for the world. Incredible achievement for the president. He just can't. I mean, our system is very difficult that way. So he has to try to find something to say. It's a difficult
Morgan,
situation.
I got to ask you a policy question. Palestinians have reacted very angrily to this, but the president says he thinks when other rich Gulf Arab states kind of come along or follow the UAE suit on this, Palestinians will too. For more than 2 years now, we haven't seen this administration building any bridges when it comes to the Palestinians. Why have they been excluded, including this peace deal here, from these major policy decisions?
Sure. It's a superb question. I think that is the most important question about this issue, because I strongly believe this has a lot to do with the Palestinians, even though it's between UAE and Israel. As a lot of us know, Israel has been gaining the ties between the Gulf Arab countries and Israel have been strengthening, primarily at the expense of Iran, right, as sort of a counter to Iran. And that's been, people like myself believe that's quite positive. I strongly believe that most people in the foreign policy community on the Republican side, and even some on the Democratic side, and I'll bet you some on the Joe Biden side as well, have long since given up on the Palestinian leadership. There's been a decision, I believe, by a lot of important people in Israel, in the United States, leadership in the Gulf Arab countries, to basically say, forget it. We're going to do our best for the world and for ourselves and all these things, and that the Palestinian leadership finally gets their act together, then great, and that'll help the Palestinians. But there's a sense that the Palestinian leadership hasn't really looked out for the interests of their people for a long time, and we're moving on without them. And we hope they come along and their leadership gets on the ball. But I think a lot of us have given up.
Morgan Muchnick, really great to have you back. Appreciate you being with us. Thanks for that.
My pleasure.